I am very excited to have the opportunity to serve under Speaker Dustin Burrows as one of the 2 Democrats that have been appointed to the Select Committee to investigate the tragedy that was the flooding in Kerr County over this past year. There was not a more memorable time on the House floor this past session than the day that the families from each of the flood victims were brought to the House floor, sat in the gallery, and as a matter of in memoriam honoring them the way we would any other fallen Texan, we honored those families of the children who'd passed. Except this was different. This was very different because it felt so wrong. The loss felt tremendous, Ron, because we weren't honoring someone who had happily lived out their life and lived out their calling and retired peacefully in their bed as an individual with their family. We were talking about children who were enjoying what should have been one of the happiest times of their lives at camp, right? Something that I think we can all look back fondly on. And each name that we read off the list, as we read these names, their parents rose in the gallery to represent the child. It's something that will stay with me for the rest of my life, and I'm sure all of my colleagues will never forget. It was horrific. And in this, I feel terrible even talking about it, right? Because it was an act of symbolism. Like, these families are living with this every single day, a loss that they should have never had to experience. So this committee is tasked with investigating, with finding out what happened. The world wants answers. The world wants to know, where was the breakdown in communication? Where were the elected officials who were given the trust and the task of representing these families in the middle of the night? Were they awake? Were they asleep? Were they present? What phone calls were made and when? What entities and agencies were contacted and when? There's a lot of questions out there still. And once we're done investigating, this committee is tasked with doing that. We are also have the legal capability of subpoena power to gather and arrange documents if need be, any type of evidence if need be. So there's a lot of broad leeway in this, because this is an unprecedented incident. So I know that Speaker Burrows is going to allow this committee to utilize the full force and effect and weight of the law to get these answers for these families that they deserve. I know the next step of the committee is to find out, from an agency perspective, what can the Texas legislature do to make operational responsiveness faster? What can we do? What type of tools do we need to equip local entities to immediately reach out, whether it's the county, the local municipality, the constable's office, to DPS, to FEMA, to the Texas Department of Emergency Management? What type of links does the legislature need to make to allow them to facilitate communication and emergency responsiveness at the drop of a dime? So we want to build those channels. We want to give them those tools to do that. The next step is, what type of funds, what type of emergency resources do we need them to have access to immediately? The legislature's been looking into this an awful lot through the ability to make grants accessible to these communities, emergency relief grants. How can we help facilitate these funds immediately? I know you and I were talking about that recently. We saw Harlingen suffer floods, devastating floods, earlier this year, and have to wait for flood relief funding. Texas wants to make sure that we're not ever in that waiting period again. So I know those are some of the things, the crucial and important life-saving mechanisms that we're tasked with investigating to hopefully gather and put together a report over the interim. We're not in legislative session right now, so we will have interim hearings where the committee will convene and we will sit and interview individuals. We will entertain testimony and ideas from the public and from these agencies, who will hopefully provide insight through each of their levels of expertise to us on these 3 things: I know we're going to take everything that they say to heart and seriously, and hopefully produce a report to provide to the Speaker of the House to hopefully incentivize immediate legislation and action in our 90th legislature.
And people affected by the horrendous floods and Harlingen here in the Rio Grande Valley in this spring are similarly, ironically, when the IBWC levee failed at Mercedes during Hurricane Beulah, and exactly what happened in Hunt, Texas. A wall of water slammed into Harlingen in the middle of the night. Testify.
Of course. And I especially invite any individual who's been affected by any type of flooding or experienced any type of disastrous response to their home or to something that they love, to their community, to their family. Please come testify. We need to hear how you were particularly affected by these tragedies. Each experience is unique and very much important to us.
It's ironic that the same thing happened during Beulah here in Harlingen when the levee in Mercedes failed. It happened over in Hunt and Kerr County. Do you agree?
It's terrible. Again, these tragedies are horrific, and the legislature is taking them extremely seriously. And we're going to do by whatever means necessary, what we have to do to properly address this in the interim while we're not in session. We are not waiting for the 90th session to meet on this. That's why this is something that is so important. We're not going to wait for the next biennium to do. We're willing and ready to get back to work right now.
Based on the similarity, do you think it might be a good thing to suggest to your committee that an interim hearing be held here in Harlingen?
Ron, I completely agree. I would openly invite and look forward to working with the Speaker and to working with the chairman to address having committees in areas that were directly affected by these floods. And I know we need and would love to host the legislature here in South Texas. This session was a great session. I am so grateful to have been given the opportunity to serve as vice chair of General Investigating Committee, which is the oversight body of our legislative body. I was so pleased to be able to serve on the House Committee on Transportation, so pleased to be able to serve on the House Committee of Natural Resources. So major wins there. As far as water funding, we just saw one of our propositions regarding water, our HB4, creating a permanent water fund. We know now that we need to start funding water infrastructure and investments in water the same way we fund our highways and byways. We shouldn't have to wait for legislative sessions to go, hey, I need $1 billion here, I need $1 million here. That fund should be a consistent fund that is available to municipalities and counties to work on their water projects, to work on flood and disaster response. So that and being able to co-author a piece of legislation like that was huge for me, and I'm so grateful and proud of that. Another fun little mark that I love to talk about when I talk about investing in downtown Brownsville and what's to come and our growth in downtown Brownsville was the concept of Gladys Porter Zoo receiving an appropriation of money from the Texas legislature. When I was going around and doing our tour and talking with our incredible workforce at the zoo, talking with Dr. Birchfield, I asked him, when's the last time y'all received some money from the state? And he goes, what are you talking about? Since I've been here, he goes, and I've never seen an appropriation of money, funds from the state. He goes, this is either federal or from grants. And so I go, that's fascinating, because when we talk about the concept of tourism and an economic generator in downtown Brownsville, there's nothing comparable to the zoo. When we talk about heads and beds and attracting tourism, it is the #1 tourist destination in South Texas. It's our crown jewel, as you've heard our city and our mayor talk about it. It's incredible. So I went back to my office and I sat with my team and I said, hey, the zoo's never gotten money from the state. And my team immediately said, well, Erin, that's because it's a zoo. The state just doesn't appropriate money to zoos. I said, what? And he goes, no, we do parks and wildlife issues, public places. Like, that's more philanthropy. The state's not going to get involved in that. And I said, well, darn it. Okay. And it stayed with me though. And then later on, I was at a meeting working with our city manager and our mayor on something, and we were looking at one of the visions of the master plan of downtown Brownsville, and it had raw meets and bounds on this map. And I looked at the map and I looked at the area where Gladys Porter Zoo was, and looking at the raw platting, and it said Brownsville Park. And my attorney brain, I'm familiar with looking at some of these raw plans and looking at these legal descriptions. And I said, hey, why does this say Brownsville Park? And they said, oh, well, because that's how it's legally classified in the metes and bounds. And I said, oh, and I didn't say anything. And I turned around and called my staff and I said, it's a park. I know it's called this, but this is back in the day when the land was transferred over. This is its legal description. And they said, really? And I said, yes, look it up. Like, go to the deed records, get the legal metes and bounds in the plat, and show me. And we did. And it is labeled as the Brownsville Park. And so I didn't say anything to anyone. And because I didn't want to get anybody's hopes up. This has never happened before. So I submitted one of my requests through the Appropriations Committee. And I quietly and patiently waited. And by the grace of God, and everything that we tried very hard to do, by the end of the session, they came to me and they give you an envelope. That's how this works. They give you an envelope with your wins. And I opened my envelope and it said $1 million for the Brownsville Park, AKA Gladys Porter Zoo. And I about cried. And I said, this is incredible. Like, just by happenstance, like just by being at the right, I believe in serendipity, I believe in fate, I believe in God's plan. And I do believe that if we talk about being, in a place and a time for a purpose, that's what we were there for. And I will never forget getting a call from some of the members on the zoo board, crying, saying, Erin, this has never happened. Like, what did you do? How did you do it? And I said, I can't tell you, because it might not happen again. But I was like, of course, I would love to sit down and talk with y'all about this, because I feel truly blessed to be able to deliver that to Gladys Porter Zoo in the city of Brownsville. When we see our families, some of our median income here for some of our families is under $30,000. Some of our children, from the independent school district that go to the zoo, they're never going to be able to go to Disney World. They're never going to afford that flight to Florida. They might not even be able to afford the drive to Six Flags or the $100 passes for each child, but they will go to the zoo. So when not even talking about economic development, when we talk about quality of life and exposing our children to top tier facilities, to access to, again, a crown jewel, something that is not comparable to the rest of the United States, they deserve that. That is life-changing for them. So my whole heart just swells thinking about being able to have served in that capacity. And it's most certainly one of my happiest accomplishments that I didn't see coming.
Any particular interim hearings, charges you would like to be involved with?
As you already know, aside from the flooding, another really fascinating topic. And again, we're constantly on our heels, ready to respond to what's happening. The DPS was recently hacked. For whatever reason, we saw thousands upon thousands, I think it was 300,000 cases, car crash cases, incident cases, vehicular accident cases that were hacked from the system. So we still see right now that I know I received a letter saying that my information had been personally compromised. And I'm really looking forward to working with the Committee on Transportation to find out what happened, what's going on, where is this threat coming from, foreign or domestic, and where is that information going? Who wants accidents to crash reports? So that's something that we're really, really ready to look into and go, hey, what can we do to further insulate and protect our information? What can we do to further penalize and criminalize these threats?
Any other top issues you're working on?
There's so many, Ron. Just really excited right now. Again, something that we're not going to stop fighting for is our infrastructure and investment in our desal plants. Our desal plant here in South Texas is the second largest in the state, next to El Paso. It's tremendous. I know we need to continue to invest in that. We, again, have made some serious investments through our permanent water fund, but we need more direct funding directly to this area for that purpose. And something that I could take the entire afternoon talking to you about, as you already know, is my very sincere commitment to fighting for juvenile justice. It's 2025, and juveniles still are not entitled to any type of a bond. They're entitled to detention hearings. As you know, adults are entitled constitutionally through our 8th Amendment to a bond. You could get an aggravated felon out faster on a bond than you could get a child out who was picked up with a vape pen. Children, after they receive their first review hearing within 48 hours of being picked up, can be held for up to 10 days without a hearing. 10 days, business days, without a hearing until their case is reviewed again. That is fundamentally unconscionable in my mind. When we now, again, understanding the evolution of psychology and the trauma of being incarcerated, we know statistically a child is almost 40% less likely to graduate from high school if they spend one night in a juvenile detention facility. It is horrific. And so I always tell them, I'm like, look, you want to talk about a psychological evaluation? Evaluate my child now. When he comes out in 10 days, if you want a problem, you're going to find one. It is horrific. So I've held hearings every year on this issue. I have argued with every probation department from here to the Panhandle and darn near Oklahoma on this issue, fighting for children. Again, fighting for people who might not know that this fight is taking place, but it's very much happening for them. Because I know that when you invest in these children, we're investing in the future of Texas, of the United States, the ripple effects of trauma. I'm investing in society. So this is extremely important to me.
Representative Gámez says you reviewed or participated anyway in the City of Brownsville's downtown revitalization plans. And if so, what do you think of it?
I'm so happy to see what's going on, to see the commitment from the city and from our city commissioners to the revitalization of Brownsville. Last session, in our 88th legislative session, I authored, sponsored, and passed a bill, a piece of legislation that created a hotel zone. So just like you see a tax increment reinvestment zone, this bill that passed is going to allow the city commission to decide where downtown they would like to build this hotel. And I know there's several talks about partnerships with developers who are committed to downtown, but within a 100-foot radius of that hotel, all the sales tax that we collect here in Brownsville is going to stay in this district. You know, our state sales tax, 7%, boom, goes straight to the state. We never see it. For 10 years under this bill, that money will stay here in Brownsville to be utilized specifically in downtown Brownsville. It's an economic development tool, just like a tax increment reinvestment zone, that is projected to keep between $60 and $80 million in downtown Brownsville, in that hotel zone, for the next 10 years until Brownsville has to start paying it back. It is going to be transformative by all means. So last session, having participated in that, this session, having participated in the appropriation to the zoo, I'm extremely committed and so excited. Everywhere I go, I tell children, I said, in your lifetime, you are going to see downtown Brownsville dramatically change, like something that our grandparents never envisioned, but knew was possible. I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to speak with y'all today. I can't do this without you. The fact that you're interested in politics right now and everyone else, it's hard to turn on the TV and talk about politics. But I promise you, good things are happening. Good things are happening. There is hope, there is love, there is passion in this position and in this service. And I am so grateful to have this discussion with you, and so grateful for the platform that you've given the public to continue to know that there is good out there in the works and hope is coming. I am in awe of what you've created and done. You are a trailblazer in a time right now of just this AI overload, algorithm overload, mainstream media overload. I don't know how people can even turn on the TV anymore. So when I see what you're doing, what you're being brave enough to do, it really gives me hope. I'll tell you what I tell at each interview that I do, whether it's from TSC, UTB, every little independent journalist, and now even our local municipality TV and journalism. I tell them, thank you for what you're doing, because it is the only way democracy is going to succeed. Because I don't know how people get the truth anymore. There is so much distrust right now. When you turn on the TV, it's disheartening. But the platform that you are giving local, real voices is what's going to save the world, in my opinion. Because I can't reach individuals who are really out there doing the work, telling the truth. It's being suppressed. So thank you for what you are doing. We really cannot do it without you. So it is brave. We are going back to our fireside chats here. This is the 2025 fireside chat. These are the types of communication and conversations that we should be having. And it's when you turn on your radio, you turn on your TV or your laptop in this case, you should know I'm going to sit down, I'm going to quietly listen for a little while, and I'm going to hear a little bit of the truth.